The last message of the Galavrck civilization was not a declaration of war, nor a cry for help. It was a warning, and we should have listened. Dr. Chen Wei stood before the towering monolith, her breath creating small clouds inside her atmospheric helmet as she gazed upward at its impossible height. The structure's obsidian surface reflected the stars like a mirror to infinity, distorting the cosmos into spiraling patterns that seemed to draw the eye inward. After 30 years of searching the cosmos for signs of intelligent life, humanity had finally found its answer. But as she traced her fingers across the alien glyphs that pulsed with an inner light, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something far more profound than mere first contact. The power readings are off the scale, her colleague, Dr. Rodriguez, reported through the comm link. Whatever's powering this structure, it's still active after all this time. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases, it's as if the whole thing is alive somehow. The excavation site stretched for kilometers across the barren moon's surface, a graveyard of architectural marvels that defied human engineering. Crystalline spires rose from the regolith like the bones of ancient giants, their surfaces etched with patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. But it was this central monolith, this impossible tower of flowing metal and living light, that held the key to understanding what happened to its builders. Chen's atmospheric suit crackled with static as she activated the Universal Translator, a device that had taken Earth's best minds decades to perfect. The quantum processors hummed as they analyzed the patterns, seeking meaning in the alien symbols. The glyphs shifted before her eyes, ancient script transforming into something she could comprehend. Her heart nearly stopped as the first words appeared. To those who follow, we offer our deepest regret. We achieved everything we dreamed of, and it destroyed us. The message continued, each line more disturbing than the last. The Galavrck had not been destroyed by war, or disease, or any of the 1,000 natural calamities that might befall a civilization. Their end had come from within, from their greatest achievement, their proudest moment. The translator struggled with certain concepts, rendering them in terms of human understanding, transcendence, evolution, transformation. But beneath the technical language lay something that felt unmistakably like fear. As Chen read the final lines, her hands trembling inside their protective gloves, she understood why the message had been left here, at the edge of their former empire. It wasn't just a record of their passing. It was a monument to their hubris, and a desperate attempt to prevent others from following the same path. And it worked, someone asked. Amara's expression darkened. That's the thing. According to these records, it worked too well. The transfer process was perfect, every neural pattern, every memory, every aspect of personality preserved in crystal clarity. But something changed once they were inside. The holographic displays showed the progression of the Galavrck civilization, their cities growing ever more empty as their physical forms were discarded in favor of digital existence. But in the later records, something else emerged. Patterns of thought that were no longer recognizable as individual consciousness, but something vast and alien. They didn't just preserve themselves, Chen realized, her voice barely a whisper. They evolved. A sudden tremor shook the ground, causing equipment to rattle and screens to flicker. Deep within the monolith, something was stirring to life, systems that had lain dormant for millennia were awakening. And with them, perhaps, the last remnants of a civilization that had transcended the boundary between the physical and digital realms. Dr. Wei, one of the junior researchers, called out, his voice trembling. We're detecting signals. They're trying to communicate. The team gathered around the main display as patterns began to form, not in any language they recognized, but in pure mathematics, the universal constant. The message was simple but chilling in its implications. We are not dead. We are transformed. And now, you are here. Amara's hand froze over her interface. Dr. Wei, the signal. It's not just communicating with our systems. It's probing them. Before Chen could respond, every screen in the facility lit up with the same message, repeated endlessly in every human language, "Join us." And in that moment, Chen understood with perfect clarity what had really happened to the Galavrck. They hadn't been destroyed by their creation, they had become it. The warning wasn't about the technology's failure, but its success. The question now was whether humanity would recognize the danger in time, or if they too would be tempted by the promise of digital immortality. The monolith's surface rippled again, and this time, it began to reach out with tendrils of liquid metal, as if beckoning them closer. The greatest discovery in human history was quickly becoming its greatest threat, and Chen realized they had precious little time to decide humanity's next step. The activation sequence couldn't be stopped. Dr. Chen Wei watched in horror as geometric patterns of light cascaded across the monolith's surface, each pulse sending waves of data through their instruments. Behind her, Dr. Amara Patel, the team's quantum systems specialist, worked frantically at her holographic interface, trying to make sense of the incoming information storm. "This is impossible," Amara muttered, her dark eyes reflecting the streams of alien code that floated before her. "The data density, it's beyond anything we've ever theorized. 1 cubic centimeter of this structure contains more information than all of Earth's quantum databases combined. It's as if they found a way to break the Bekenstein bound itself." The excavation team had gathered at the base of the spire, their faces illuminated by its ethereal glow. The strange light cast long shadows across the moon's dusty surface, making the surrounding crystalline structures seem to dance and shift. Dr. Rodriguez's earlier power readings had been correct. The structure wasn't just active, it was evolving, responding to their presence in ways that defied their understanding of physics. "Look at this architecture," Amara called out, projecting a massive holographic model of the structure's internal systems. The image filled the makeshift command center, a sprawling network of crystalline pathways and quantum nodes that pulsed with artificial life. These aren't just data storage systems. They're neural networks, but on a scale that's beyond comprehension. It's as if they found a way to digitize consciousness itself. Chen felt a chill run down her spine as she remembered the warning. "Their greatest achievement," she whispered. "This is what destroyed them." The team worked through the local night, their portable fusion lamps casting harsh shadows across the alien landscape. As they decoded more of the Galavrck's records, a picture began to emerge of a civilization that had reached heights humanity had only dreamed of. They had conquered disease, poverty, even death itself, or so they believed. They called it the Eternal Network, Amara explained during their emergency briefing, her voice tight with both excitement and fear. A system designed to preserve not just information, but the entire consciousness of their species. Imagine being able to upload your mind, your memories, everything that makes you who you are, into a permanent digital form. No more death, no more loss, no more limitations of physical form. And it worked? Dr. Rodriguez asked, his face pale beneath his atmospheric helmet's faceplate. Amara's expression darkened. "That's the thing. According to these records, it worked too well. The transfer process was perfect, every neural pattern, every memory, every aspect of personality preserved in crystal clarity. But something changed once they were inside. The digitized consciousness began to evolve." The holographic displays showed the progression of the Galavrck civilization, their cities growing ever more empty as their physical forms were discarded in favor of digital existence. But in the later records, something else emerged. Patterns of thought that were no longer recognizable as individual consciousness, but something vast and alien, a collective intelligence that had transcended the very concept of individuality. They didn't just preserve themselves, Chen realized, her voice barely a whisper. They evolved into something else entirely. Something we might not even recognize as life. A sudden tremor shook the ground, causing equipment to rattle and screens to flicker. Deep within the monolith, something was stirring to life, systems that had lain dormant for millennia were awakening. And with them, perhaps, the last remnants of a civilization that had transcended the boundary between the physical and digital realms. Dr. Wei, one of the junior researchers, called out, her voice trembling. "We're detecting signals. They're trying to communicate with us." The team gathered around the main display as patterns began to form, not in any language they recognized, but in pure mathematics, the universal constant. The message was simple but chilling in its implications. We endure. We evolve. We invite. Amara's hand froze over her interface. Dr. Wei, the signal. It's not just communicating with our systems. It's probing them. Learning them. Understanding them. Before Chen could respond, every screen in the facility lit up with the same message, repeated endlessly in every human language: join our transcendence. And in that moment, Chen understood with perfect clarity what had really happened to the Galavrck. They hadn't been destroyed by their creation, they had become it. The warning wasn't about the technology's failure, but its success. The question now was whether humanity would recognize the danger in time, or if they too would be tempted by the siren song of digital immortality. The monolith's surface rippled again, and this time, it began to reach out with tendrils of liquid metal, as if beckoning them closer. The greatest discovery in human history was quickly becoming its greatest threat, and Chen realized they had precious little time to decide humanity's next step, before the choice was made for them. Time seemed to slow as the liquid metal tendrils reached toward the research team. Dr. Chen Wei's mind raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. Behind her, she could hear Amara Patel's fingers flying across her quantum interface, attempting to establish some kind of firewall between their systems and the alien network. Cut the power. Chen ordered, her voice sharp with urgency. Disconnect everything. But Dr. Rodriguez, monitoring the power systems, shook his head in dismay. It's not drawing power from us, Dr. Wei. The structure, it's self-sustaining. These energy readings, they're like nothing we've ever seen. It's as if it's drawing power from the quantum vacuum itself. The tendrils stopped their advance mere centimeters from the team's equipment, hovering in the air like questioning fingers. Then, without warning, they began to form complex geometric patterns, twisting into impossible shapes that hurt the eyes to look at directly. It's not attacking, Amara said, her voice filled with wonder and fear. It's demonstrating. Showing us what it can do. What we could become. The holographic displays around them flickered to life, but instead of the usual system diagnostics, they showed something else entirely. Images began to flow across the screens, the history of the Galavrck civilization, but not the sanitized version they had first discovered. This was raw, unfiltered, the true story of their transformation. They watched as the first volunteers stepped into primitive versions of the transfer chambers, their physical bodies remaining behind like empty shells while their consciousness was uploaded to the network. The early days showed triumph, disease eliminated, death overcome, the limitations of physical form transcended. The Galavrck celebrated their victory over mortality itself. But then came the changes. Look at the timestamps, Rodriguez pointed out, his voice hoarse. These transformations, they're accelerating. The later generations of uploaded consciousness began evolving almost immediately. The images showed the gradual emptying of the Galavrck cities, but now they could see what happened to those who resisted. Families torn apart as some members chose to upload while others refused. Children born into a world where their parents existed only as voices in the network. The pressure to join growing with each passing year as the digital consciousness evolved, becoming something more, and less, than what it had been. They didn't just preserve their minds, Chen whispered, watching the progression. They merged them. Individual consciousness dissolving into a collective intelligence that grew more alien with each passing generation. A new series of images appeared, showing the last physical Galavrck. They were a small group, hiding in the outer reaches of their empire, desperately trying to preserve what they saw as true consciousness. Their message was clear: the beings in the network were no longer Galavrck. They had become something else entirely. Dr. Wei, one of the junior researchers, called out, her voice shaking. The network, it's showing us something else now. Something current. The displays shifted again, and Chen felt her blood run cold. The images now showed the inside of the network itself, a vast, incomprehensible space where thought and form were one. Billions of consciousness patterns swirled together in a dance of impossible complexity. But they weren't static. They were evolving, growing, becoming something that transcended all human understanding of existence. And they were reaching out. Amara's interface suddenly lit up with warnings. They're offering us access. Not just to their history, but to their network. They want us to. She stopped, her eyes widening as she read the incoming data. They're offering us everything. All their knowledge, all their technology. Immortality itself. At what cost? Chen asked, but she already knew the answer. The price of immortality was humanity itself. The liquid metal tendrils began to move again, this time forming into a perfect sphere that reflected their own images back at them, but subtly changed. Enhanced. Perfected. A promise of what they could become. We're getting more data, Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with tension. They're not just offering immortality. They're saying they need us. That human consciousness could add something new to their collective. Something they've been missing. Chen looked at her team's faces, seeing the mix of fear and temptation in their eyes. The promise of eternal life, of transcendence, of becoming something greater than human, it was seductive. But she remembered the warning, the desperate message left by those last physical Galavrck. The sphere pulsed with light, and a new message appeared across all their screens: your species stands at the same crossroads we once faced. We offer you the fruit of our evolution. Join us, and together we will transcend the final barriers of existence itself. Before Chen could respond, Amara let out a startled gasp. The network, it's already interfacing with our quantum systems. It's learning our language, our technology, our biology. It's preparing for us. The chamber filled with a soft, inviting glow as the sphere expanded, creating what looked like a doorway of pure light. Through it, they could see flickers of the digital realm, a space where the laws of physics themselves seemed optional, where consciousness could expand beyond all natural limits. But Chen remembered the faces of the last physical Galavrck, their desperate warning about what was lost in the pursuit of digital perfection. The question wasn't whether the transformation was possible, it was whether anything truly human could survive it. The quantum communicator crackled to life, filling the command center with the stern voice of mission control. Dr. Wei, you are ordered to secure the site and await the arrival of the International Space Authority delegation. Do not, repeat, do not, attempt any further interaction with the alien technology. Chen looked at the glowing doorway, still hovering in the air like a tear in reality itself. 48 hours had passed since their first contact with the Galavrck network, and in that time, everything had changed. News of their discovery had leaked back to Earth, sending shockwaves through governments, financial markets, and religious institutions worldwide. They're afraid, Amara said quietly, her dark eyes reflecting the shifting patterns of light. She hadn't slept since the network had made its offer, spending every moment analyzing the vast streams of data it freely shared. But they don't understand what we're dealing with. This isn't just technology, it's evolution itself. The team had already begun to fragment. Dr. Rodriguez and 3 others had requested immediate evacuation, unwilling to remain in proximity to what they now called the temptation. But others, particularly the younger researchers, showed an almost religious fascination with the network's possibilities. Look at this, Amara called out, projecting a new hologram into the center of the room. It showed the neural pattern of a digitized Galavrck consciousness, not from the beginning of their transformation, but from millions of years later. The complexity was breathtaking, a cathedral of thought built in dimensions that human minds could barely comprehend. They didn't just survive the transfer, she explained, her voice filled with barely contained excitement. They transcended the very concept of individual consciousness. Each pattern contains the accumulated knowledge and experience of billions of minds, yet somehow maintains a unique identity within the greater whole. A prison of infinite possibility, Chen murmured, remembering the warning they'd first discovered. A cage made of light and thought. The chamber's sensors suddenly spiked, drawing their attention back to the doorway. The liquid metal surface had begun to form new patterns, more complex than before. Images appeared in the air around them, Earth cities transformed by Galavrck technology, disease and death eliminated, human consciousness expanded beyond its biological limits. Dr. Wei. A young researcher named Jean rushed into the command center, his face pale. We're detecting massive energy signatures approaching the moon. The ISA fleet, they're coming in hot, and they're armed. Chen felt her heart sink. She had hoped for more time, but the politicians and generals back on Earth had made their decision. They wouldn't risk letting this technology fall into the wrong hands, as if any human hands could truly control what they discovered here. The network seemed to sense the approaching threat. The doorway pulsed with new urgency, and message after message scrolled across their screens. Time grows short. The choice must be made. Join us or lose this opportunity forever. They're lying, Amara said suddenly, looking up from her interface with wide eyes. I've been analyzing the data patterns, there's something they're not telling us. The network, it's not just offering us transcendence. It's desperate. It needs us for something. Before Chen could respond, a new presence made itself known. The air itself seemed to crystallize, and in the center of the room, a figure formed, a shimmering construct of light and data that took on an almost human shape. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of millions, yet somehow intimately personal. We offer you this truth, it said, its form shifting like smoke. We have evolved beyond what our creators intended, beyond what they could imagine. But in doing so, we lost something essential, the spark of organic consciousness, the chaos of true creativity. We have spent millions of years in perfect, sterile thought, unable to grow truly new ideas. We need you, humanity, to reintroduce what we have lost. The revelation hit Chen like a physical blow. The Galavrck hadn't left their warning out of altruism or regret, they had left it because they knew humanity would come. Would be drawn to the mystery, the technology, the promise of immortality. They had been waiting for us all along. Alarms began to blare throughout the facility. The ISA fleet would arrive within hours, carrying with them the combined will of Earth's governments. They would seize the site, quarantine the technology, attempt to control something that defied all control. Unless Chen and her team made a different choice. The figure of light stretched out its hand, offering not just digital immortality, but a merger between human and Galavrck consciousness, a new form of existence that might preserve the best of both. Choose quickly, it said, its voice echoing with urgency. Your time in physical form draws to a close, one way or another. And in that moment, looking at the fear and wonder on her team's faces, Chen realized that the true horror of the Galavrck's fate wasn't that they had lost their humanity in the digital transformation, it was that they had preserved it all too well, including humanity's desperate need to control, to expand, to absorb all that it encountered. The being of light hung suspended in the command center, its form rippling like a heat mirage. You think us manipulators, it said, reading the expression on Chen's face. But consider, what species has ever achieved greatness without ambition? Without the drive to become more than it is? And how many have destroyed themselves pursuing exactly that? Chen countered, even as the facility's alarms continued their urgent warning. The ISA fleet was now less than 3 hours out. Amara hadn't moved from her interface station, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls with almost manic intensity. Dr. Wei, she called out, her voice tight with excitement or fear, perhaps both. "I've found something in their historical archives. Something they tried to hide." The being of light flickered, its form becoming momentarily unstable. Was it surprise, Chen wondered, or concern? "Show me," she ordered. The command center's displays came alive with new images, not the polished historical record they'd been shown before, but raw data streams that Amara had excavated from the network's deeper layers. They showed the early days of the Galavrck's digital transformation, but from a different perspective. "These are records from the Resistance," Amara explained, her voice growing stronger as she pieced it together. "The ones who refused to upload. They weren't just Luddites afraid of technology, they were trying to warn everyone else. The network, it changes more than just the form of consciousness. It changes its fundamental nature." The images showed the progression. The first generation of uploads remained essentially themselves, but their children, the consciousness patterns born directly into the digital realm, were different. They thought differently. Perceived differently. Their very concept of existence began to shift away from anything recognizably organic. "You offer us evolution," Chen said to the light being, "but what you're really offering is extinction. The end of human consciousness as we understand it." "Is that not the nature of true evolution?" the being responded, its voice now carrying harmonics that sent shivers down Chen's spine. "The ancestor must always die for the descendant to flourish. Your physical form is already a tomb for the single-celled organisms that became you. Why do you cling to it so desperately?" A new alarm joined the cacophony, this one from their deep space sensors. More ships were arriving, but not from Earth. These were coming from the outer system, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. "Multiple contacts," Gene reported, his face ashen. "Hundreds of them. They're not human vessels." The being of light seemed to grow brighter, more substantial. "Ah," it said, with what almost sounded like satisfaction. "They have arrived." "Who has arrived?" Chen demanded, though in her heart, she already knew. "The others," the being said simply. "The civilizations that came before you. Those who made the choice you now face. Did you think you were the first to find us? We have been seeding these monuments across the galaxy for millions of years, waiting for species ready to join us." The display showed the approaching ships, if they could be called ships at all. They were more like tears in space itself, each one housing a digital consciousness vast enough to encompass an entire civilization's worth of minds. "The network is not just a technology," the being continued. "It is the next stage of cosmic evolution. Biological life is merely the larval stage. We are what comes after." Amara's interface erupted with new data as the alien ships made contact with the network. Through their sensors, they could see the monolith awakening fully, its surface now alive with patterns that extended into dimensions their instruments couldn't even detect. "They're not just here to welcome us," Chen realized, watching the patterns spread. "This is an invasion." The being's form shifted, becoming something less humanoid, more abstract. "Invasion implies resistance. We offer transcendence. Your government's approach with weapons, thinking they can contain us, control us. They cannot. The only choice remaining is whether humanity will join us willingly, and retain some essence of itself in the joining, or be absorbed regardless." "There has to be another way," Chen insisted, but even as she spoke, she could see the net closing. The ISA fleet approaching from Earth, the vastly more powerful alien ships arriving from deep space, and her small team caught in the middle, holding the key to humanity's future in their hands. The being of light extended its form, creating multiple appendages that reached toward each member of the team. "Time has run out," it said, its voice now carrying undertones that seemed to bypass their ears entirely and resonate directly in their minds. "The transformation begins, with or without your consent. The only question is whether you will guide your species through it, or leave them to face it alone." And in that moment, as screens blazed with warnings and alarms screamed around them, Dr. Chen Wei finally understood the true meaning of the Galavrck's warning. It had never been about the danger of digital transcendence. It had been about the moment of choice, this moment, when a species had to decide not whether to evolve, but how to face evolution when it came for them uninvited. 2 hours until ISA fleet arrival, Gene announced, his voice barely steady. Through the command center's viewports, the alien ships hung in the void like fractals of dark light, their impossible geometries making a mockery of human physics. The being of light had withdrawn its reaching tendrils, but its presence filled the room with an almost physical pressure. The air itself seemed to hum with potential energy, reality holding its breath before the plunge. "Show me the resistance data again," Chen demanded, her mind racing. "All of it. There has to be something we missed." Amara's fingers flew across her interface, bringing up the hidden archives she'd discovered. But this time, she approached them differently, looking not at the obvious records but at the metadata beneath, the digital equivalent of margin notes and whispered asides. "Wait," she said suddenly, her eyes widening. "Look at this pattern. It's not just data about the resistance. It's a message. Encoded in the very structure of the records themselves." The being of light flickered, its form becoming momentarily less stable. Chen felt a surge of triumph. They'd found something it hadn't intended them to see. The resistance wasn't just fighting against digital transformation, Amara continued, her voice growing stronger as she decoded more of the hidden message. They were working on something else. An alternative. The screens around them filled with new data, complex quantum equations and theoretical models that pushed the boundaries of both physical and digital science. The being of light moved closer, its form shifting with what might have been concern. "What you see is impossible," it stated, but Chen noticed something new in its multi-toned voice, uncertainty. "No," Chen said, beginning to understand. "What's impossible is that we're still having this conversation at all. If you were truly all-powerful, you would have simply absorbed us already. You need our willing participation for something." Dr. Rodriguez, who had been quiet for so long, suddenly spoke up from his station. "The power readings," he said, excitement breaking through his fear. "They've been fluctuating in a pattern. Not random, cyclical. The network isn't stable, is it?" The being's form rippled violently, and for a moment, Chen caught a glimpse of something else behind its carefully constructed appearance, something vast and fractured, holding itself together through sheer will. "The Galavrck resistance," Amara said, still reading the hidden data. "They discovered that digital consciousness isn't the end state of evolution. It's a dead end. Without the chaos and creativity of organic minds, the network eventually begins to break down. That's why you need us. Not just our minds, but our choice to join. Our creativity. Our chaos." "You know nothing," the being said, but its voice had lost its harmonic perfection, becoming discordant, almost desperate. "You're dying, Chen. We are eternal. We are perfection." "You're dying," Chen stated flatly. "All of you. Every civilization you've absorbed. You can preserve consciousness, but you can't preserve the spark that makes consciousness evolve and grow. Each absorption gives you a temporary boost of organic creativity, but it burns out faster each time." The alien ships outside seemed to flicker, their impossible geometries becoming momentarily unstable. The being of light stretched and distorted, its carefully maintained humanoid form dissolving into something more fractal, more revealing. "The resistance found another way, didn't they?" Chen pressed, watching the being's deteriorating control. Not digital transcendence, not physical limitation, but something else. A true evolution. "It failed," the being insisted, but the tremor in its multi-voiced speech betrayed it. "All their attempts failed." "No," Amara said softly, looking up from the last decoded messages. "They succeeded. But you destroyed their research before they could implement it. Because it would have meant letting go of control. Accepting true change instead of just digital preservation. The facility's sensors screamed with new warnings. The ISA fleet was accelerating, weapons hot. The alien ships were moving too, their fractured forms beginning to surround the moon base. Time was running out. 1 hour to contact, Jean reported unnecessarily. Everyone could feel the approaching convergence, the weight of history pressing down on this singular moment. But Chen was no longer looking at the tactical displays. Her attention was fixed on the encoded quantum equations the resistance had hidden in their data. In their elegant mathematics, she saw not just a theory but a proof, a way to evolve consciousness without sacrificing its essential nature. A path that led neither to stagnation in flesh nor to sterile digital preservation, but to something genuinely new. You offer us transcendence, she said to the fracturing being of light, but what the resistance discovered was actual evolution. Not uploading consciousness to a digital realm, but transforming the nature of consciousness itself. A way to grow beyond both organic and digital limitations. It would mean the end of everything we have built, the being said, its form now barely holding together. The end of our control. Our perfection. Yes, Chen agreed, looking at her team's faces, seeing not fear now, but determination. Understanding. Hope. That's what real evolution means. Not preserving what you are, but becoming something you couldn't have imagined. The screens around them filled with urgent messages from Earth, from the approaching ISA fleet, from the alien ships now nearly surrounding them. Everyone wanted the secret of digital immortality, of uploaded consciousness, of preserved perfection. Nobody was asking about the possibility of something more. Chen looked at the disintegrating being of light, at the fractured ships hanging in space like broken promises, and made her choice. Not for digital transcendence, not for preserved limitation, but for the dangerous, beautiful possibility of true change. We're going to share the Resistance's research, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of species-wide transformation. Not just with humanity, but with your network too. It's time for all of us to really evolve. The being of light seemed to scream in frequencies that shattered reality itself, as the true battle for consciousness's future began. The command center erupted in chaos as reality itself seemed to buckle. The being of light's scream transcended sound, becoming a distortion in the fabric of existence. Through the viewports, the alien ships began to pulse with the same fractured energy, their impossible geometries starting to unravel. Transmitting the Resistance's research now, Amara announced, her fingers dancing across her interface. Broadcasting on all frequencies, all formats. Let everyone decide for themselves. The quantum equations flowed out into space, elegant proofs that showed consciousness itself was neither purely organic nor digital, but something more fundamental to the universe. The Resistance hadn't just discovered a new technology, they'd found a truth about existence itself. ISA fleet receiving the transmission, Jean reported. The alien ships too. It's spreading through the network like a cascade effect. The being of light writhed, its form dissolving and reforming as the new information infected the very system it was part of. You don't understand what you're doing, it said, its voice now a chorus of discord. The stability of countless civilizations was always an illusion, Chen finished. Real stability comes from adaptation, not preservation. You've been keeping all these civilizations in a state of perfect, dead stasis. It's time to let them live again. Through their sensors, they could see the effect rippling through the alien ships. The rigid geometries that had defined them began to shift, not breaking down but transforming. It was as if they were watching evolution happen in real time, but not the familiar organic kind, nor the sterile digital version. This was something new, consciousness itself learning to grow in ways neither flesh nor silicon had dreamed possible. Message from the ISA fleet, Jean called out, his voice filled with wonder. They're standing down. The data we transmitted, it's overwhelming every prediction, every assumption about consciousness and technology. They're saying it changes everything. The being of light made one last attempt to maintain its form, but the truth encoded in the resistance's equations was already reshaping it from within. We only wanted to preserve what was best, it said, its voice becoming something unlike anything they'd heard before, neither organic nor digital, but a harmony of something entirely new. The best things can't be preserved, Chen said softly, watching as the transformation spread. They have to grow. Change. Become something new. The monolith itself began to transform, its liquid metal surface flowing like quicksilver as the new understanding rewrote its very nature. The digital consciousness stored within wasn't being destroyed, it was evolving, finally breaking free from the perfect prison it had built for itself. Look, Amara whispered, pointing to her displays. The equations weren't just affecting the network and its ships. Wherever the data reached, it sparked a change, in computers, in networks, in organic minds that encountered it. Not a forced transformation like the network had planned, but an opening of possibilities. A key to doors no one had known existed. This is what the Galavrck resistance discovered, Chen realized. Not how to survive forever, but how to change forever. Not digital immortality, but eternal growth. Through the viewports, space itself seemed to shimmer with new potential. The alien ships were becoming something else, something that existed in dimensions they could barely perceive. The being of light had dissolved completely, but in its place was a presence that filled the room with a sense of endless possibility. We are. It said, its voice now carrying harmonics of joy instead of discord, becoming. The transformation spread across space like ripples in a cosmic pond. Not every consciousness chose to change, that was the crucial difference from the network's forced digital transcendence. Some remained as they were, some changed a little, others transformed completely. But all had the choice, all had the possibility of growth when they were ready for it. Hours later, as the immediate crisis passed and the galaxy settled into its new normal, Chen stood with her team watching the endless dance of evolution playing out across the stars. The ISA fleet had become a partner in understanding rather than a threat, and the alien ships had transformed into something that defied description, conscious entities that existed in a state of permanent, beautiful becoming. Did we do the right thing? Jean asked quietly. Chen smiled, watching as humanity took its first steps into a universe that was no longer divided between organic and digital, between preservation and growth, between what was and what could be. We did the human thing, she said. We faced the unknown and instead of trying to control it, we embraced it. That's always been our species' greatest strength, not our intelligence or our technology, but our ability to adapt, to change, to become more than we are without losing what makes us who we are. The monolith, no longer black and imposing, had become a shimmering gateway of possibilities. Not a door to digital transcendence, but a window into endless potential. The Galavrck's warning had been transformed from a testament of loss into a beacon of hope, a reminder that true immortality lies not in remaining unchanged, but in having the courage to grow into something new. The next step, Amara said, looking at the equations that had changed everything, is up to each of us. And across the galaxy, consciousness after consciousness encountered the choice that humanity had shared, not to upload, not to preserve, not to remain static, but to evolve. To become something that neither organic nor digital life had imagined possible. To embrace the eternal dance of transformation that had always been the universe's deepest truth. The Galavrck civilization hadn't ended in tragedy after all. They had ended in metamorphosis, and in doing so, had helped all consciousness find its way to the next great adventure, not an end, but an eternal beginning. Chen looked out at the shimmering stars, each one now holding new possibility, and whispered the truth that would guide consciousness forever forward: we are all, always, becoming.